There are nights, when the world feels far too heavy. Nights when even breathing seems like work and dreams feel like something you packed away a long, long time ago. I don't know if you've ever sat by your window on one of those nights, listening to the rainfall, watching the streetlights glow in that quiet, tired way, and wondered, when did it all get so hard? When did we stop believing that tomorrow could be better, or that we're still allowed to try? Tonight's story isn't about someone famous. It's not about someone who stood on big stages or made headlines. It's about a girl I once knew, a girl who kept running. Not because she was fast, not because she wanted to win, but because running was the only thing that made her believe she was still moving forward, even when life felt stuck. Her story isn't loud. It's quiet, like the rain tonight. Soft steps on empty roads, small choices no one noticed. But step by step, mile by mile, she carried herself forward. And maybe, by the end of this story, you'll realize something too. Moving forward doesn't have to be fast. It just has to be forward. So, if you're tired, it's okay. Let's sit together, listen to the rain, and I'll tell you the story of the girl who kept running. If I had to tell this story again, I think it all started with something small, a pair of worn-out shoes, a frayed jacket, and a girl quietly walking through empty streets day after day after day. Back then, no one in this little town paid her much attention. People were busy enough with their own lives, tending shops, fixing leaky roofs, fussing over small things that somehow filled up long days. But me, I often sat by the window, watching whenever the rain began to fall. Perhaps that's why I noticed her sooner than anyone else. She never walked fast. Her steps were slow, heavy, as though each one was a small battle between rising and falling again. Sometimes I wondered, what kind of weight was this young girl carrying to wear such tiredness in her posture? Not the exhaustion of the body, no. It was the kind of tiredness you see in someone's shoulders, in the way they tuck their hands deep into their coat pockets, as if holding on to themselves. Some people whispered, maybe there's something wrong with her. But in this town, people didn't really bother about others. As long as no trouble was caused, she walked, they let her be. Only I, sometimes, quietly from my corner seat in a small cafe, watched her silhouette through the fogged-up window glass. Every day, without fail. Whether it was raining or dry, whether the wind blew cold or gentle, she walked those same old streets, past grey-tiled rooftops, cracked paint on forgotten walls, moss-covered steps slick with rain. And slowly, I began to realize she wasn't walking toward anywhere in particular. There was no place waiting for her. No one standing at the end of the road with arms open, calling her name. She simply walked, like a habit, like a quiet promise to herself that she was still moving forward. Once, when our paths crossed at a sleepy intersection, I softly asked, "Why do you keep walking?" She gave a faint smile, smaller than a raindrop. "Because when I walk, I know I'm still going forward. If I stop, I'm afraid I won't stand up again." At the time, I didn't understand. Or perhaps I didn't want to understand. Who would choose to keep walking roads that led nowhere? But as the months stretched on, as rains continued weaving themselves through the town's days, I slowly began to see. Sometimes people don't walk to arrive somewhere. They walk to quiet the noise inside, to keep their feet from standing still in places where nothing makes sense anymore, to remind themselves, however small, however invisible, they are still breathing, still alive. That girl, she was quieter than even the softest rain. Her footsteps made no sound, but I knew. Every step was a silent defiance against sadness. On cold mornings, she passed bare trees, newly opened bakeries, stray cats curled up in old phone boxes. Nothing in this town seemed to change. Only her. Her steps grew quieter, slower with each passing day. Yet somehow, she never stopped. There were afternoons when I'd watch her small frame disappear beyond the hill. I wondered, what kept her tethered to this world? Perhaps it was these very steps, the last fragile thread pulling her forward. Someone must have left her, I thought. Someone must have broken her heart once, fractured it so completely she gathered up the pieces herself, tucked them deep within, and carried them through these long roads. No tears, no bitterness, only movement, until the ache inside no longer roared so loudly. People often say loneliness is sitting alone in a dark room, but I think the loneliest moments come when you walk through streets beneath 1,000 lights, past countless faces, and yet no one truly sees you. She was that kind of lonely. The road she walked learned not to speak of her passing. Doorways offered no shelter. Streetlights stretched their glow no further than usual. Only the rain seemed to keep her quiet company. I used to think, maybe she was waiting for something. A sign, a gentle glance, a question asked with kindness. But no, she wasn't waiting. She kept walking, because stopping meant surrender. One evening, the wind howled stronger. I thought surely she'd turn back, seek shelter beneath some awning. But no, she pressed on, that small figure leaning into gusts, hands curled into thin coat pockets, stepping through rain, through cold, through unseen darkness. I realized she was saving herself this way. No one had taught her this. No book could explain it. But through days too silent, too empty, she must have learned. If she didn't take one more step, no one would lift her up. If she didn't keep going, she would remain forever stuck where the pain first began. I never asked her anything more. There was no need to know how long she planned to walk. Perhaps she didn't know either. All she knew was that walking today was enough. Tomorrow, she'd walk again, even if tired, even if no one remembered her name. Each step was still carrying her further from yesterday's sorrow. She didn't need anyone's understanding. She didn't need validation, because deep down, she already knew. Moving forward, even slowly, is always better than standing still. It kept raining, day after day. The sky above this town seemed to forget how to stop. The streets stayed slick with puddles. Rooftops glistened with quiet sorrow. And behind every fogged-up window, people moved through their lives slowly, carefully, as if trying not to disturb the tired rhythm of the world outside. And through it all, she kept walking. That girl with her worn shoes and threadbare coat, her small figure becoming part of the town's silent scenery. Most people barely noticed her anymore. Perhaps they thought she was strange. Perhaps they thought she had nowhere better to go. But no one really asked. No one stopped her to say hello. She passed them by, just another shadow beneath an umbrella, another echo of footsteps against a wet pavement. But I noticed, not because I meant to, but because some things, once you see them, you can't unsee. Some sadness lingers in the way someone holds their shoulders, in how their gaze never rises past the grey clouds above. Some loneliness is quieter than others. Hers moved with such patience, like rain falling without end. From my little corner in the cafe, behind a misty window pane, I often watched her, moving along the streets like someone who wasn't truly looking for anything, passing shuttered shops, empty bus stops, stray cats curled beneath dripping eaves. She belonged to these days of long rains as much as the puddles did. There's a kind of heaviness that doesn't scream or collapse in public. It simply settles in, like fog on glass, like damp in old walls. I wondered, did she even notice how invisible she'd become? Each day she retraced the same steps. No destination, no change in her path. And yet, every morning she would set out again, her pace steady, her silence intact. Perhaps this was her way of keeping time, of reminding herself that even if nothing changed, she could still keep going. Someone once asked me, half joking, what's she hoping to find out there? Salvation? A miracle in the rain? I only smiled. People who have never been lost don't understand what it means to keep moving, simply because stopping feels too much like giving up. I don't know what she thought about on those walks, but I imagine somewhere between the sound of her footsteps and the endless drizzle, she was making peace with things she couldn't fix, forgiving herself for things she couldn't forget, teaching her heart to carry itself even when it felt far too heavy. There's courage in that, though few would recognize it. The courage to face mornings that greet you with nothing, to lace up tired shoes and step outside into a world that doesn't wave back. The courage to walk roads where no one waits at the end. Rain blurred the outlines of everything, houses, trees, even her figure as she moved farther down the street. But I never lost sight of the quiet strength beneath her solitude. It wasn't loud, wasn't proud, but it endured. On some mornings, the rain would pause for a moment. A weak sun would slip through, touching rooftops with the gentlest light. And still, she walked, not faster, not slower. The same steady rhythm of someone who has stopped expecting answers, but continues anyway. I began to wonder, how many days does it take before you no longer hope someone will ask if you're okay? How many rainy afternoons must pass before you realize no one is coming to walk beside you? Perhaps she had already learned. Perhaps that was why she never looked around anymore. Her world had narrowed to the space between her footsteps and the sky above. The world of people had grown distant, blurred behind curtains and closed doors. But even so, she kept going, because somewhere beneath layers of doubt and weariness, she still believed in forward. Even if forward looked like another empty street, even if it felt like walking in circles. Not all journeys are measured in miles. Some are counted in days survived, in mornings met with quiet resolve, in choosing movement over surrender, breath over silence. I never heard her speak of sorrow, never saw her falter beneath the weight of invisible things. But I understood those who have fallen before, who have sat with the ache of being unseen, learn to rise without applause. They learn to carry themselves across bridges no one else can see. She walked through days no one remembered, through rains no one else noticed anymore. And in doing so, she was rewriting something inside herself, not loudly, not all at once, but step by careful step. There's a lesson in her quiet persistence, a reminder that healing doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It arrives softly, through repetition, through mornings where you lace up your shoes knowing no one will notice, but choosing to walk anyway. I watched her because somewhere deep down, I envied her strength. Not the strength to endure great storms, but the strength to meet small, grey days with unwavering patience. Her footsteps faded down long, wet roads, beyond my window, beyond my sight. But still, I imagined them continuing, steady as the falling rain. There was a day, not so different from all the others. Rain still pressed against the windows. Grey clouds still hung low like heavy curtains across the sky. The streets remained quiet, puddles gathering in familiar corners. But something felt lighter, not in the air, not in the sky, but somewhere inside me. I can't say why I noticed it. Perhaps it was the way she walked that morning, still slow, still alone. But something had changed. A small shift, like a string being pulled ever so gently in a different direction. She paused beneath the same old tree she passed every day. Usually, she walked right by without looking, but this time, she stopped, just for a moment, head tilted up, eyes resting on the branches, bare but not lifeless. Raindrops clung to the twigs like small glass beads. I watched from behind the window, breath held, as if afraid any sound might break the fragile silence she carried with her. And in that quiet moment, I wondered, had she finally seen something beautiful again? Sometimes healing doesn't come like a sunrise. It doesn't burst over the horizon and flood everything with warmth. No, sometimes it arrives in small pauses, in the way someone lifts their head for the first time in weeks, in how their steps grow just a little less heavy. She didn't stay long beneath the tree, but when she walked on, her shoulders seemed softer somehow, less burdened, less braced against the world. It made me think of how many things go unnoticed simply because we're too busy looking for something bigger. How often we miss the quiet beginnings of change, like grass growing beneath snow, like light returning to a room we thought would stay dark forever. From that day, I watched her more closely, not with worry, but with a quiet kind of hope. Hope that even the smallest shift could grow into something more, and little by little, I began to see it. She still walked alone, still under grey skies and steady rain. But there were moments, small, almost invisible, where it seemed she was seeing her surroundings again. Her eyes lingered on things she used to pass without notice, the way rain made the pavement shine like silver, the soft green pushing through cracks in the bricks. Even the cats beneath the eaves seemed less like strangers and more like quiet companions on her journey. One morning, she paused to tie her shoe. A simple thing, but in that small moment, she smiled, not at anyone, not for show, just to herself. The kind of smile that said, I'm still here, I'm still walking, and for now, that's enough. I realized then, she wasn't walking away from pain anymore. She was walking towards something, even if she couldn't name it yet, toward quieter mornings, toward softer days, toward a version of herself who might one day laugh without remembering why she forgot how. Healing is patient. It waits in corners, in quiet streets, in days full of rain. It waits for us to notice something small and gentle and safe again. It doesn't ask for declarations. It only asks us to keep moving. And that's what she did, step by step, not rushing, not searching, just walking and seeing and breathing. I thought then, perhaps the bravest thing isn't to fight or conquer. Perhaps it's simply to stay, to keep waking up, to keep moving forward on roads that feel endless, because somewhere down them, even the faintest light will appear. It reminded me of something I once heard. The road doesn't change because you walk it, but you change because you keep going. And so she changed, even if only a little. Her steps grew steadier. Her gaze lifted more often, not always, not every day, but enough to notice. The rain still fell. The streets remained worn and empty, but inside her, something had begun to mend. Sometimes we don't need the world to soften first. We only need to soften toward ourselves, to forgive our own pace, to trust the quiet rhythm of one more step. She didn't need applause. She didn't need someone to tell her she was doing well. She already knew, because the weight in her chest was lighter, because she could breathe without bracing, because she could look up and see something besides grey, a distant light, not bright, not loud, but there, waiting, at the end of the long road. There comes a point, I think, when you stop waiting for something to happen, not because you've given up, but because you've come to understand. Some things unfold too slowly to notice. Some changes arrive without noise, without ceremony, like a season shifting its light, like rain fading to mist, like the quiet softening of your own heart. For a long time, I watched her walk those same streets, and for a long time, I thought the story belonged to her. But somewhere along the way, I realized it was changing me too. There's a strange kind of peace in watching someone else survive quietly, not thrive, not conquer, just survive. One foot in front of the other, one breath, one step, one small, ordinary day. It makes you wonder about your own reasons for standing still, about all the mornings you told yourself you couldn't, all the afternoons you sat behind windows, watching the world blur and slip away. She never knew how often I thought of her as I sat there, coffee cooling, rain tapping at the glass, how her silent persistence seemed to speak directly to something inside me, not in words, not in advice, just in proof. Proof that quiet strength exists, that survival can be small and soft and slow and still matter. I started walking more too, not as far, not every day, but enough to feel my feet on pavement again. Enough to remember what air feels like when it brushes your face, cool and damp and real. Enough to remember how the world keeps moving, and maybe I could as well. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of her ahead of me, not close enough to call out, not close enough to disturb her quiet world, just enough to know. We shared these streets now, not together, not apart, simply alongside. There's something tender about moving through the same space without speaking, about knowing someone's sorrow without asking for its story, about learning slowly how to carry your own. I began to notice things I hadn't before. The way puddles hold small pieces of sky, the way leaves press themselves against wet sidewalks like quiet prayers, the way light, even grey and thin, softens corners I thought would stay harsh forever. It wasn't healing in the way I'd imagined, not sudden, not triumphant, but steady and kind. I thought about how we're taught to chase big answers, loud resolutions, but maybe most of what matters is quieter than that. Maybe healing isn't a finish line, but a choice you make over and over, to keep moving, to notice beauty, to forgive the slowness of your own heart. One evening, I walked farther than I had in months, past familiar streets, past shuttered shops, past the places where my own sadness liked to hide. And there, beneath the softest drizzle, I found myself smiling, not for any reason, Not because anything had changed, just because the air felt good, because my feet still worked, because even tired hearts can find small moments of ease. She passed by on the other side of the road. Did she see me? I'm not sure. But in that brief glance, I thought I caught something like recognition. Not of me, but of the simple fact we're still here, still walking, still breathing, still choosing in our quiet ways to stay. I think about that often now, how survival rarely looks heroic, how it's made of soft mornings, slow afternoons, and evenings where rain taps gently on rooftops while we keep putting one foot ahead of the other. I don't know if she still carries the same weight she did before, but I'd like to believe it's lighter now, because I know mine is. There's a gentleness in the way the heart relearns the world, in how we teach ourselves slowly to trust again, not people, not promises, but time, the steady rhythm of days, the quiet proof that nothing stays too heavy forever. These streets still hold her footprints, and now they hold mine too, not as ghosts of sadness, but as soft reminders. We kept going, we're still going, and that is enough. Somewhere along the way, without realizing it, we had begun to heal, not together, not all at once, but quietly, separately, in small, unnoticed ways. It wasn't dramatic. There were no grand declarations, no moments of sudden clarity beneath stormy skies, just little shifts, like the softest wind turning leaves without sound, like roots growing deeper beneath silent soil. She kept walking. So did I. And in our quiet footsteps, something softened inside us both. I noticed it first, not in her, but in myself. How my breath no longer caught when I stepped outside. How I no longer braced against the day, as if every morning was something to survive. How I began to greet the rain not with dread, but with something close to tenderness. I started to understand. The weight wasn't gone. It simply didn't own me anymore. And perhaps it was the same for her. One morning, she paused longer beneath a tree, not in sorrow, just in stillness, looking up through bare branches toward a sky still grey but somehow less heavy. I wondered if she felt it too. That slow unraveling of the knot inside, that quiet release of breath she didn't know she'd been holding. There's a kind of strength in pausing, in standing still long enough to notice you're still standing, not broken, not undone, simply here, little by little. I watched her reclaim the small moments, not just walking, but noticing, not just passing through the world, but letting it touch her again. She lingered near flower pots sprouting green despite the cold. She watched the way light gathered softly on puddles. She waited, patient, as a cat stretched lazily in her path. And I did the same. Not because I meant to, but because healing has a way of teaching you how to follow gentler rhythms, how to let go of hurry, how to be where you are fully without apology. We were no longer strangers to these streets. We belonged to them now, not as people running from sadness, but as people who had learned how to walk beside it without fear. Sometimes our paths would cross in the smallest ways. A glance, a nod, a shared smile not meant to say hello, but simply, I see you. And that was enough. Enough to know we weren't alone in our quiet healing. Enough to remind me that growth doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it moves like roots beneath the earth, slow, steady, certain. I began to keep small promises to myself, to step outside, even on grey days, to notice something beautiful, even when I didn't feel beautiful myself, to believe, even softly, in the slow work of time. One evening, I found myself walking without realizing where I meant to go, just moving, steady, as rain softened the world into something quieter than thought. I passed her on the corner. She was looking up, not at the sky, but at the light spilling from a window above. A warm light, a simple light, and something about it made her smile. Small, genuine, unhurried. That moment stayed with me, not because it was remarkable, but because it wasn't. Because healing had found its way into even the smallest gestures now, into the lift of her shoulders, into the soft curve of her mouth. We weren't fixed, not suddenly whole, but we were changing, little by little, enough to notice, enough to trust. There's a beauty in slow things, in mornings that come without rush, in footsteps that no longer flee, in hearts that learn gently how to open again. We had no destination, no finish line to cross together. Only this, the quiet certainty that we were still moving forward, still breathing, still here, and somehow that was more than enough. By now, even the rain seemed softer. Even the grey skies felt less heavy, less unforgiving. Somewhere between the long walks and the quiet mornings, we had begun to find our way back, not to who we were before, but to something simpler, something gentler. I no longer watched her from behind glass with the same quiet ache. Now I simply noticed, not out of worry, not from curiosity, but from a quiet kind of respect, the way one might notice a tree blooming slowly after winter, the way one might notice their own breath, deeper, easier, without realizing when it stopped feeling heavy. She still walked the same streets, but something had changed in how she carried herself. Her steps no longer seemed weighed down by yesterday. Her gaze, when it lifted, stayed longer on small, good things. Light through windows, leaves trembling in soft wind, people laughing softly over tea. I thought of how healing isn't a destination. It's not something we arrive at one day and declare ourselves done. It's the quiet work we do with our witnesses, the forgiveness we offer ourselves in the privacy of our hearts, the softening of breath, the loosening of shoulders, the choice again and again to stay, to be here, to keep walking. Some mornings she sat on the same bench by the old tree, not in sadness, not in waiting, just to sit, to watch, to be part of the quiet world that had waited so patiently for her return. I understood that now, the importance of pausing, of letting the world move without rushing to catch up, of letting yourself belong, even to small things, even to grey days, even to rain. We learn to heal not by outrunning our hurt, but by making peace with the slowness of it, by letting it be part of us without letting it be all of us. She smiled more now, not always, not loudly, but often enough to know. Her heart had softened, her footsteps had forgiven, her spirit had begun to trust again, not in promises, not in outcomes, but in the simple act of moving forward. I smiled more too, not because everything was perfect, but because I no longer expected perfect, because enough small moments had shown me peace isn't something you find, it's something you make, quietly, patiently, softly. One afternoon, we crossed paths beneath soft rain. No words, no greetings, just a shared glance, and something lighter in the space between us, a quiet knowing that we had both survived, that we had both changed, that we no longer carried our sadness alone. Some wounds don't close with time, but they do grow quieter. They learn to ache less loudly, to live beneath the surface, not as pain, but as gentle memory. We had learned to live alongside them, to let them exist without letting them define us. The streets still looked the same, but I no longer feared them, no longer felt swallowed by their silence, because I had learned silence isn't emptiness, it's space for breathing, for noticing, for becoming. She had taught me that without knowing, without trying, simply by being who she was, someone who kept going. Little by little, I realized healing isn't something we do alone, even when no one walks beside us, even when no one cheers. We heal in the company of quiet things, of soft mornings, of steady rain, of strangers who share a path without needing to share words. There's comfort in that, in knowing we're not the first to walk through grey days, not the first to learn the slow art of staying, not the first to find beauty again, even where we thought it had left for good. One day, I passed her sitting beneath the old tree. She looked up, met my eyes, and smiled. And I smiled too. Not as strangers, not as friends, but as two people who had quietly found their way through. No finish line, no applause, just breath and space and the quiet promise of another step. And so, the days went on. Rain still came and went, soft and patient. Grey skies still hung, but not as heavy as before. And we kept walking, not with urgency, not with fear, but with something quieter, something steadier, something like peace. I no longer counted the days, no longer wondered when things would feel different, because somehow they already did. Not dramatically, not loudly, but deeply, like roots settling, like breath evening out, like heartbeats remembering how to trust slow rhythms again. She still walked, so did I. But now, our steps belonged to different hearts, not the ones that carried hurt like stones, but the ones that had learned how to set them down, gently on the side of the road, to walk lighter, to breathe easier. There's no finish line for healing, no banner that says you made it, just quiet mornings, soft evenings, and the knowledge that we kept going, even when no one cheered. Sometimes I would see her stop by the window of a bookstore, not to buy, just to look, to let herself wonder softly about new stories, about quiet worlds waiting to be opened. Sometimes she sat beneath the tree with her eyes closed, not asleep, not tired, just still, letting the world hold her for a little while. And I understood that now, that we don't always need answers. We don't always need a grand purpose. Sometimes breathing is enough. Sometimes staying is enough. The streets we walked grew familiar in a new way, not as places to escape, but as places we had learned to belong to. Sidewalks that had carried our sadness, now carried our softer footsteps. Benches that had held our loneliness, now held moments of quiet gratitude. We changed, little by little, step by step, not into something new, but into something kinder, more patient, more at ease with the grey days, soft rains, the silent pauses. There's no rush anymore, no need to chase what isn't ready, no need to force what isn't meant. Everything comes in its time, and we have learned how to wait, not idly, but gently, with open hands, with open hearts. I thought once that healing would look like brightness, like sun breaking through clouds. But now I know. It often looks like this, like small steps on quiet roads, like soft smiles exchanged without words, like knowing we made it through, not to a destination, but to ourselves, to a version of us that forgives easier, that breathes deeper, that trusts slower, that stays. And isn't that enough? To still be here, to still be moving, to still be choosing each day the quiet work of living. One morning, we crossed paths again, not in passing, not in silence, but in pause. She smiled. I smiled back. No words, just knowing. We're here. We kept going. We don't need to rush anymore. And so, this story ends here. Not with a grand finale, not with answers tied in ribbons, just with a quiet knowing, with footsteps no longer afraid of where they're going, with hearts that no longer rush to arrive. I wonder, as you listened, did you think this story was about her? About the girl who kept walking? Or perhaps somewhere along the way, you realized it wasn't really about her at all. Maybe it was about you, about the days you kept going, even when no one noticed, about the mornings you chose to rise, even when it hurt, about the quiet steps you've taken toward healing, toward peace, toward simply surviving. We don't always recognize our own quiet bravery until someone else's story helps us see it. And if tonight something feels softer inside you, if the rain outside sounds less lonely, if your breathing feels lighter, then perhaps this story has done enough. But if tomorrow your heart feels ready for another quiet journey, there's a story waiting about a boy who failed and then tried again. The boy who failed and tried again. Maybe in his story, you'll find a small part of yourself too.